Skeletal muscle is the largest organ in the human body, and it affects almost every aspect of human health and human performance. Study after study has shown that skeletal muscle size and strength are highly correlated with how well we live and how long we live. Unfortunately, skeletal muscle size and strength decrease as we age due to a condition called sarcopenia. Now that's the bad news. The good news is that in most cases there are steps we can take to preserve our muscle mass and prevent and even reverse the effects of sarcopenia. In this video, I'll go over the importance of skeletal muscle, what sarcopenia is and how this condition affects your health and quality of life, and what you can do to preserve the quantity and quality of skeletal muscle as you age. So first of all, the importance of skeletal muscle. And the first and most obvious function of skeletal muscle is to be able to move. So skeletal muscles attach to bones via tendons and allow us to interact with our environment and move ourselves through space. And as I mentioned in the intro, it's the largest organ in the human body, and it has an influence on all-cause morbidity and mortality, cardiovascular health, cognitive health, brain health, mood, inflammation, immunity, fertility, metabolic health, hormone health, bone health. You get the idea. It has an effect on almost every other aspect of human health. Skeletal muscle also helps us look good, feel good, and play good. So if we do resistance training, we can change our body composition and actually enhance the way that our body looks. I've just gone over how skeletal muscle has an impact on almost every other aspect of human health, and that's how it helps us feel good. And it can help us play good in that if we have an activity such as rock climbing or golf that we want to improve at, there are specific resistance exercises that we can do to make us better at that chosen activity. And finally, skeletal muscle is also highly metabolically active, and it's the main place where you dispose of and regulate your blood glucose. So if we lose a significant portion of our skeletal muscle through sarcopenia, you can see that it's going to have wide-ranging negative effects on our overall health. So what is sarcopenia? Well, sarcopenia is a Latin word and literally means a poverty of flesh. Sarcopenia is a decrease in skeletal muscle mass and strength as we age. Sarcopenia can start as early as our 30s, but really becomes a problem and is noticeable after the age of 50, and then it accelerates into our 60s, 70s, and beyond. In order to understand sarcopenia, it's important to understand some basic muscle anatomy. So let's take a quick look at that. So each muscle consists of individual muscle fibers or muscle cells, and there are hundreds of thousands of these muscle fibers in each muscle. The exact number will depend on the size of the muscle that you're looking at. Now generally there are two types of muscle fibers. There is slow twitch or type 1 and fast twitch, which are called type 2. Now there's some subcategories of type 2 muscle fibers, but we're just going to stick to the basic category of slow and fast twitch for this analysis. So slow twitch or type 1 fibers are fibers that contract slowly and generate a relatively small amount of force, but they are very resistant to fatigue. They have a high concentration of mitochondria and are able to metabolize fat relatively easily, and they're especially important for activities that require sustained muscular contraction, such as the maintenance of an upright posture. Fast twitch or type 2 fibers, as the name implies, are fibers that contract quickly, they generate higher forces, but they are easily fatigued. These fast twitch fibers are especially important for brief exertions that require large forces like jumping or sprinting. The percentage of type 1 fibers to type 2 fibers varies from muscle to muscle and from individual to individual. Now muscle fibers are organized into motor units, and the motor unit includes one motor neuron and all the muscle fibers that it innervates. Motor units allow us to control force production. If we require relatively little force, we will recruit less motor units. The more force is required, the more motor units we will recruit. Now all muscle fibers in a given motor unit are of the same fiber type. Now slow twitch or type 1 motor units are always recruited first. It's only when we require rapid contraction or higher forces that we recruit our type 2 motor units. In sarcopenia, the decrease in skeletal muscle size and strength is due to declines in both the size and the number of muscle fibers. And it's mostly the type 2 fibers that are affected. There's a decrease in muscle fiber size due to a net loss of proteins, organelles, and cytoplasm, causing a shrinkage of the cellular volume, which is also referred to as atrophy. Basically, this is a result of protein synthesis going down and protein degradation going up. There are always these two forces going on in muscles, just when we're younger, they tend to balance each other out. As we get older, our protein synthesis goes down, our protein degradation goes up, so we have a net loss or a decrease in the size of our skeletal muscle. Now let's take a look at the decline in the number of muscle fibers with sarcopenia. So if we go months, years, or decades without high force production demand, those fast twitch motor units are never activated, And what will happen over time is they can become denervated, which means that the motor neuron stops attaching to those muscle fibers. Now, some of these orphan fast-twitch fibers that are still viable will be innervated by neighboring slow-twitch motor units, and then the fast-twitch fiber will be converted to a slow-twitch fiber. But some of these orphaned fast-twitch fibers will simply die off, and once they die off, they're gone forever. We cannot get them back. Our main goal is to preserve and grow these fast-twitch fibers as we age. So what causes sarcopenia? Well, there are likely many factors, and it's not fully understood at this time, but 3 major contributors are decreased activity, hormonal changes, and nutrition. And one of the problems with sarcopenia is that it's a very insidious onset. You don't really realize that it's happening. So it's not like you wake up in your 50s one morning and you suddenly can't get up out of a chair. It's a very slow progressing condition. And the problem is that as our skeletal muscle size and strength decreases, we tend to do less and less, feeling like we're just getting older and we're not capable of doing what we used to do. And it keeps getting worse and worse over time until you reach a point where you realize that you can barely stand up from a seated position, even with the assistance of your upper body. So what are the effects of sarcopenia, or this decrease in skeletal muscle size and strength? Well, it often leads to a condition called frailty, and frailty is just a generalized weakness. Frailty is characterized by low grip strength, low energy, slow walking speed, decreased activity level, and unintentional weight loss. It's a general loss of function and an inability to complete your activities of daily living. You may have difficulty standing from a sitting position or climbing a flight of stairs. You may have difficulty getting dressed in the morning or doing your personal care. Now, I was a sales rep for a medical equipment supplier for about 10 years, and I ran into hundreds of clients with frailty. I would be called in to provide things like grab bars and super poles, things like 2-wheel walkers and 4-wheel walkers to help them with their ambulation inside and out, and things like lift chairs and raised toilet seats to help them stand from a seated position. And what you see with frailty is a huge loss of independence, and it becomes very difficult on family members and caregivers. These people often progress to a point where they have to be in a nursing home so they can't do anything for themselves anymore. And then they often end up in a wheelchair because they become too weak to even stand or to walk any short distances. Also, what we see in people with frailty is an increased risk of falls and also an increased risk of pretty serious injury when they do fall. So because they've lost those type 2 fibers, they don't have the quick contraction or the response time necessary to either prevent a fall or to brace themselves adequately when they do fall. So if and when they do fall, which is very likely, they're going to break a wrist or break a hip. And if they do fall and break a hip, the outcomes are often very negative. So that paints a pretty bleak picture of people with sarcopenia, but in the absence of other underlying issues, it is preventable. So what can we do to prevent or reverse the effects of sarcopenia? Well, if you remember the 3 main causes, the decreased activity, hormonal changes, and nutrition, we can have a direct effect on 2 of those. So first of all, nutrition. Make sure you're getting adequate protein. Remember that the decrease in muscle size due to sarcopenia was mostly due to decreased protein synthesis. So we want to make sure that we have the adequate building blocks for protein synthesis, and that is getting enough amino acids and protein. So in my research, the recommendation for most professionals is 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should be eating 150 grams of protein per day. And in addition to nutrition and getting adequate protein, resistance training is the key. You want to start resistance training as early in life as possible and develop that habit, but if you're 50 or over, the time to start is right now. And it doesn't need to be a lot. 1 fairly intense, full-body resistance training session per week is enough to preserve and to grow skeletal muscle. More is better, but do what you can. This is a case where a little bit is much better than nothing at all. And going back to our discussion of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, you're going to need to push these resistance training sessions a little bit to be able to recruit those type 2 motor units and preserve those type 2 fibers. It's going to have to be a little bit uncomfortable, and you're going to have to sweat. You have to be willing to push yourself a little bit. And the good news is it's never too late to start. Clinical intervention studies in the oldest and frailest nursing home residents have demonstrated significant functional improvement through a combination of nutrition and resistance exercise. So to wrap things up, I remember a time when I was a sales rep for the medical supply company. I was delivering a wheelchair to a client, and there was an elderly lady with her 4-wheel walker as I was unloading my van. She wasn't speaking directly to me, but she knew I could hear, and I was the only other person around. And she said, "The golden years are here at last. The golden years can kiss my ass." Now I got a big chuckle out of that, but it was quite clear that she was not pleased with how her golden years were going. Although sarcopenia is debilitating and has the potential to make our golden years miserable, the good news is that in most cases it is preventable and even reversible. And always remember that small, consistent actions equal big changes.